Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last live session of the week. So, just in case you're new to these, we do these typically 3 days a week: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we take a quick look what's been going on in the markets over the last couple of days and what to look out for really over the next few days. Let me just put up the risk warning while I'm talking away. It's been a really interesting week this week. We'll start off by looking at oil. We have seen a good recovery in the price of oil continue over the last 3 weeks. The price of oil has risen, I think, by about 25%. So it's a pretty significant move. We also saw the euro. We were talking about the euro earlier this week. We saw the euro break out through a big level. I think 115 had been a real barrier for the euro, but we'd seen the market manage to break through there earlier this week. So I think that's an interesting end to the week. Just before I get into it, I just put this up. Because we've got the big Brexit vote next week, we are doing zero spread for clients over the vote. So that starts, you can see on the screen. So that starts from 14th of January, the day before, from 11 p.m. So again, all you need to take advantage of that is to have an account with us and to open up an account. Just go to Capital.com and the details are there. So that's something we're doing next week, because clearly we're expecting, I think, maybe some interesting market moves coming over that vote. But I think the risk warning and everything else has been up for long enough. So let's just get into it. Let's start with crude oil. I think I've been saying for maybe a couple of weeks now, maybe oil ends up being the interesting market in 2019. From a medium term point of view, maybe oil ends up being the recovery story. And I was wondering if we were going to get something of a pullback just to test out how strong this recovery is. And we haven't had it yet, but you can see the size of the move. I mean, these are daily candles we're looking at. We'll look at the short term in a bit more detail in a minute. But when was this? I think was it Christmas Eve? The price of oil, the low for the day was 42.33, and it closed at 42.50. So it was a really weak finish, but now it's currently trading at $53. So we've seen a 25% recovery in the price of oil. So this is a really sizable move. We had these declines, this strong decline that had been in place off the 77 area, which was a 4-year high for oil back in October. And it was pretty relentless, this sell-off. We had a bit of sideways going on ahead of 50 from late November to mid-December, and then the market fell off a cliff again. But you can see just the strength of that recovery since then, how far oil has come back. And I was saying earlier this week, then I thought that $50 was the key one, that it really needed to regain the $50 a barrel mark. And we're through there. I think the next hurdle are these highs just before it plunged those new lows. So the highs maybe around $54, $55 a barrel. That's maybe the next hurdle. So maybe going into next week, we'll have a little bit of weakness from the price of oil. But that's when it gets interesting. But you can see just how much it's moved over the last week. It's gone up every day, and it's gone from about 47 to 53 currently. So it's moved 15% just in the last 5 to 7 days. And I do think this is an interesting market now for 2019. Is it like gold? Let me just flip back, have a quick look at gold just to compare these trends. Is it doing now what gold was doing sort of back here, September, October, broke out of the downtrend? Gold's initial move wasn't as sharp, but then, we've seen the price of gold push higher. So I'm wondering if over the next few months, do we see a similar sort of price action happening in oil? But we'll have to wait and see. But let's just take a look on the hourlies for oil. Let me just flip this up. There's the trend. Look at that. That just has been a relentless move up all this year. Let's just pick up on the on that trend on the shorter term chart, just for some shorter term levels to watch. So our trend looks, something like that. So at the moment, the trend from the 2nd of January, got trend line support coming in around about $52 a barrel. The lows from yesterday were 51.60, 51.50, that sort of area. So if we saw the price of oil under a bit of pressure this afternoon, then I think 51.50 to 52 is the area to watch. But for now, any weakness, I think, looks like a buying opportunity. So maybe if we have it under a bit of pressure next week, for me, that's when it starts to look potentially a bit more interesting, the price of oil. If it sells off, where do we see the buyers come back in? But, the move we've seen, just going back to that daily chart, we've broken out of that downtrend. We've had a good recovery now. Can it hook back, find some support, and bang, off we go again? But a really interesting market, I think, into 2019, the price of oil. Let's look at the euro. Let's have a quick. I mean, this is another one. I think I put it on Twitter the other day. Let me just flip it over to an hourly chart or a 4-hourly chart just to make this a bit clear. The euro had been, pretty dull in recent months. So let's just pick up on the level. The big level on the upside, 115. Euro dollar could not get through here. So November rallies up, has a look at it. Third week of November, has a look at it just before Christmas, has a look beginning of this year, cannot get through 115. And when we see a market just knocking its head against the level, then clearly this is a resistance level. But breaks through resistance can often be a sign that sentiment is changing. And we've had this in the last couple of days or so. We've seen the 115 level cracked. So I think it's interesting. And I think now, if this is a valid break, and so far it is looking like one, we've spent a day and a half above this level. It dipped back a bit yesterday, but we've bounced back again this morning. So it's starting to look like a valid break. So I think in the short term, I think perhaps the next levels to target, these mid-October highs, just above 116. And maybe after that, we'll go back and have a look at the really big barrier up at 118. But that breakthrough 115, I think, is a significant one for euro, US dollar. So we'll come back to that when we look at these markets on Monday and see how things are performing. But again, if we were going to pick up on our trend line at the moment, it's a sharper trend, which often suggests it's a bit unsustainable. But there we go. That's the trend over the last week for euro dollar. So at the moment, trend line support coming in. Let's call it yesterday's low, 114.80. I think is the first support if we saw the euro under a bit of pressure this afternoon. But just to flip this back to a daily, I think it's looking interesting up here. Now we've broken out of this sort of sideways trading range that the market had been in for the last few months. MACD looking a bit overextended down there. So again, maybe we'll get something of a pullback next week. RSI as well, not quite an overbought, but again, looking a bit extreme, which isn't surprising. It's been such a narrow range and we've had a half decent move up over the last week. It's maybe not surprising that these traditional indicators start looking a bit overstretched. So again, where it gets interesting is if we start to see a pullback, because we'd expect to see buyers come back in for euro, US dollar. So I think there has been a lot going on this week, but for me, those are the two markets where we've had significant stuff go on. So for euro dollar, the breakthrough 115, and for oil, just that continued recovery. After hitting $42 before Christmas, up to 53 today. Right, let's take a look at some of these other markets. So we have a bit of a move on the pound about just over an hour ago, I think. Let me just flip this over to a really short-term chart. You'll see the move. There it is. So the pound was trading about 127.60 at 10 to 11, so an hour and a half ago. And there was some news breaking or some rumor breaking. I saw it on Twitter. Clearly, the politicians are back in work now. So all the Brexit chatter steps up. We have the so-called meaningful vote next week. But there was I saw on Twitter that I think somebody had said there was a less than 50% chance of the vote going ahead. Or no, of Brexit being delayed. Sorry. There was a more than 50% chance that Brexit was going to be delayed. That was a rumor on Twitter. So we saw the price move from 127.60 up to 128.50. So we had a 90-point move in 2 minutes. These are 1 minute candles. So we saw the pound break through 128. And I was saying earlier this week, that maybe the pound ends up being the surprising recovery story this year. Things at the moment, things look pretty bad when it comes to Theresa May's deal. It looks like it's not going to get passed next week. but the pound is holding up well. So I'm wondering, how bad how bad can things really be for the pound? Perhaps so much of the bad news is in the price. We had that big decline from 143 against the US dollar in April last year. Maybe we'll see further recovery for the pound over the next few months. So I think that might be an interesting longer term trade. I think it's 127.50 when we were looking at it on Wednesday. Clearly lifted a bit today by that rumor, but pretty choppy. Pretty choppy trading. It does get moved around quite suddenly, but 128 has been something of a barrier. 129, maybe it wouldn't surprise me if we just chopped around for a couple of days at these levels, waiting to see what happens with the vote next week and whether it goes ahead. So that's pound US dollar. So always interesting because of Brexit, but maybe difficult to call because of all the rumor swirling around. Maybe euro US dollar is the more predictable of those two markets at the moment. Let's take a look at stocks. So stocks look set to have, I think, strong finish to the week. Let me just delete some of these lines off. So it's quite an astonishing start, I think, to 2019 for stock markets. Clearly we ended last year pretty much in the doldrums, with the Dow Jones having its worst December since 1931. And just a really strong performance so far this year. We've got, looking at daily candles here, we've had again almost pretty much a week of rising markets when it comes to US stock markets. It does look, this sort of move here is interesting, where it moved to those lows again just before Christmas, rallies, sells off, and has pushed higher. That does suggest that in the short term, at least over the last couple of weeks, the trend is up, even though the bigger trend is arguably still down, but we have seen a lot of positive sentiment towards stock markets. I think the interesting thing is going to be when we have a half decent sell-off. When we had sell-offs in the last couple of months of last year, a lot of panic seemed to grip markets, and we sold off really heavily. What happens this time around? If we see the market drop, let's say 1,000 points from where we are now on the Dow, do we see the buyers come back in? Have we seen sentiment actually shift? So going into this afternoon, still strong. So here's the Dow, still strong. Immediate levels to watch. Yesterday's lows, if you're short-term trading this, yesterday's lows on the Dow were around about 23,700. So we're 250 points above that. We've got pockets of support left, over the last few days, 23,570, then a bigger support down here from the 7th of Jan, around about 23,300. So even if we saw the market under a bit of pressure this afternoon, there are plenty of pockets of support just below where the market is currently trading. Let's have a look at the Nasdaq, because clearly, what was going on with stocks, with tech stocks, sorry, clearly affected the broader market last year. And so here's our Nasdaq. If we picked up on the trend from the top, let's just draw that in. We're still in it. We're still in this downtrend. Oh, hang on, I clicked the wrong thing there. We're still in this downtrend from sort of up here. Doesn't like it. I'm gonna have one more go and then I give up. There we go. So if we pick up on those from those highs, our trend looks something like this. So the Nasdaq's an interesting one, because if you believed that trend was still intact, we're pretty much at the level where we should be thinking about selling short. And actually, for those of you who are new to selling short, the idea that you can profit from falling markets, sorry, we did put a video up yesterday as part of our trading biases section on our YouTube channel. So if you go to that, it's called, I think, Trading in One Direction, because plenty of people, the majority of traders, only ever go long. They only buy first to try and profit from the market rising, and that's fine in a rising market. But of course, you can short sell as well. So there's an introduction to short selling on our YouTube channel that went up yesterday. But anyway, so we're getting back up to levels where if you thought the trend was going to continue down, bang, back below 6,000, we're pretty much up there now. So I think it's interesting. It's interesting. The levels to watch on the Nasdaq. I mean, I'd pick up this high up here from December the 12th, so about 6,900. So again, it's a good 300 points above where we are now. But let's see what happens over the next few days. Do we see a bit of weakness coming back in? The sellers coming back into the Nasdaq 100 and maybe putting pressure on wider markets. So I think the Nasdaq could be an interesting one to watch. We'll come back when we do this Monday lunchtime. We'll see how Friday ended up and see how these markets look. And to wrap up our indices, let's take a look at the DAX. I was watching the DAX earlier today because I mean the DAX had a really poor performance last year. You know, it was even when US stock markets were making fresh highs in the summer, the DAX was still falling. You know, the DAX had been in this downtrend since whenever. Why isn't it drawing trend lines for me today? What's going on? I think I need to maybe log out and log back in. But you know, the DAX, the trend for the DAX maybe looks something like that. That's not brilliantly drawn. But there was our trend for the DAX last year, and like the Nasdaq, you know, this trend is from sort of September last year. Like the Nasdaq, if the DAX is going to run out of steam anywhere, then we're pretty much here. I think, you know, levels to watch on the DAX, the sort of 11.2 is where the trend line's coming in now. So let's see. You know, maybe this strength that we've seen in stock markets so far this year, it has been pretty surprising. But maybe in the short term, at least, we're coming to the end of that. Let's see what happens next week. It could make for an interesting week next week. Here's the shorter term chart. One of the reasons I was looking at this earlier today was because it did push out higher. It traded up to what 10,960 this morning, the DAX, and it's been selling off. But I was looking at yesterday's lows, and I'm a big fan of sort of previous lows. And we had a lot of support yesterday at 10,840 on the DAX, and it has traded down, what, about half an hour ago, down to 10,850. So I think the DAX, if you're a short-term trader, the DAX is maybe an interesting one to watch this afternoon to see how it performs around the sort of interim support from yesterday, and then the absolute lows from yesterday down here at 10,780. So lots of support, 10,780 through to 10,840 for the DAX. But the bigger picture, still strong, obviously, like all these other markets at the moment. But let's see what happens when we start getting near to that trend line. Do we see sellers start to come in? And finally, to wrap up the last one of the week, gold. I think gold's been a little bit boring over recent days. It's struggling with that 1,300 level. You can see over the last week, we're pretty much flat over the last week. Had a push higher on the 4th of Jan, trading 1298, just above 1298, but cannot, for now at least, get through 1,300. So a little bit of a dull week. But you know, markets don't move in straight lines forever. That recovery off those lows still very much intact. It's still looking, because of the strength of the rise we've seen over the last 2 months, it's still looking a bit overheated up here. If you're looking at the RSI, you know, quite overbought. MACD just not quite rolling over for a sell signal, maybe. Oh, it just is actually. It just did over the last couple of days, rolled over for a sell signal. So maybe we'll see a bit of unwinding of this strength in gold. But again, for me, that trend is still up. So any weakness still looks like a buying opportunity. So let's see what happens with gold when we come into next week. So to wrap things up, I think that the standout market for the week has been crude oil, because we've seen such a strong move continue. The euro has been interesting because of that break through the 115 level. You know, does it suggest that we're going to see even more gains to come over the next few months for euro US dollar? And we've had a bit of a move on the pound today on Brexit rumors, but the big event is next week, when we have at the moment what's planned for the vote on Theresa May's Brexit deal. We will wrap things up there for this week. As usual, any questions, drop me an email. My email address is david.jones@capital.com. To find out more about the company, open an account, take advantage of that zero spread we've got going on next week over the vote. Just go to our website, Capital.com, and to see more about trading, different strategies. We've just, in the last half hour, uploaded a video on Apple where I take a look at that, not profit warning, but where they downgraded their forecast for revenue. So that's gone up on our YouTube channel. So just take a look at that, and we will do this all again on Monday of next week at 12:30 and have a catch up and to see how the markets finished the week. Thanks for coming along. Have a good weekend, and hopefully see you on Monday.